Let's hear the reading from the Gospel of Luke this day. I'm reading this day from the Message translation, the 24th chapter of Luke, the 1st through the 12th verses. At the crack of dawn on Sunday, the women came to the tomb carrying the burial spices they had prepared. They found the entrance stone rolled back from the tomb, so they walked in. But once inside, they couldn't find the body of the Master Jesus. They were puzzled, wondering what to make of this. Then out of nowhere, it seemed, two men, light cascading over them, stood there. The women were awestruck and bowed down in worship. The men said, "Why are you looking for the living one in a cemetery? He is not here, but raised up. Remember how he told you when you were still back in Galilee that he had to be handed over to sinners, be killed on a cross, and in 3 days rise up." Then they remembered Jesus' words. They left the tomb and broke the news of all this to the 11 and the rest. Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them kept telling these things to the apostles, but the apostles didn't believe a word of it, thought they were making it all up. But Peter jumped to his feet and ran to the tomb. He stooped to look in and saw a few grave clothes. That's all. He walked away puzzled, shaking his head. Crazy, right? Nonsense, preposterous, idle talk, fake news. Now, the Passover was over, and the women were so anxious to get back to some sense of normal. But there was one task to see to yet, the final details of burial. So up at the crack of dawn, they made their way to the tomb. But when they looked in the tomb, there was no body. And instead they were greeted by two dazzling strangers who had one question for them. "Why are you looking for the living among the dead?" Well, that's preposterous in itself. They weren't looking for the living among the dead. They were looking for the dead because Jesus was dead, dead, dead. And when you're looking for someone dead, a cemetery is a good place to look. Everybody knows dead people don't go anywhere. Faced with this confusing news, they didn't get it. But they knew they had to tell the others, and they ran back to tell the rest. "I don't know what we can tell you, but we were there, and there was no body. The tomb was empty. And those strangers told us that Jesus was not there. He was risen." Risen. Well, the disciples didn't believe a word of it. They thought the women had lost their marbles. Not because they were women and therefore somehow unreliable witnesses, but because what they were telling them just didn't make any sense. It was impossible. Impossible. Now, when it comes to impossible, in Alice in Wonderland, Alice and the Queen are having a conversation, and Alice says maybe exactly what we would say: "No one can believe what is impossible." But in reply, the Queen says, "Oh, you just must be out of practice. By the time I was your age, sometimes I believed 6 impossible things before breakfast." 6 impossible things before breakfast. Now, maybe you've already had breakfast today. But let me remind you what we've done today, or what we are doing today, is we're gathering to celebrate the impossible, the resurrection. It is preposterous. It makes no sense. It is not normal or everyday or ordinary. It's crazy. Here it is, a Sunday, a beautiful day, and we could be doing all sorts of things, and yet here we are together, praying, singing, giving. And why? Because the impossible is possible. Because the impossible has happened. And if the impossible has happened, if Jesus is alive, then life really is about love and forgiveness. It is about humility. It is about not labeling ourselves or others except with the label child of God. It is about the ministries of hope and healing and reconciliation. If Jesus is alive, then life really is about reaching out to the least and the last and the lost. It is about loving God with every fiber of our being and loving our neighbors as ourselves. Let's be honest. Resurrection was not at all what the women were expecting. Resurrection was not at all what the disciples were expecting. It made no sense. Resurrection is not what we were expecting, because it is far from anything that is normal or ordinary. But when God is at work, the impossible is possible. And in the resurrection, God opens a whole new step in reality that we never imagined. Now, the resurrection, as crazy as it sounds, is at the core of who we are. In his letter to the church in Corinth, Paul says, if Jesus is still dead, then why would I face wild animals at Ephesus? Why would I risk life and limb to go here and there and everywhere to tell the good news of Jesus? Why would I face shipwreck and starvation, and on goes the list? If Jesus is dead, I might as well just sit back, relax, and take it easy and live off my Pharisees' pension. When Easter rolled around last year, we were isolated, separated from one another, quarantined. And the year between then and now has been a disorienting year, to say the least, filled with fear and anxiety, uncertainty, lots of questions, loss, and grief. And maybe you, like me, has said more than one time between then and now, I just can't wait for things to get back to normal at church, back to normal in our community, back to normal at work, back to normal for school, back to normal. But friends, Easter is not about normal. Easter is not about getting back to normal. Easter is about living into a reality that is beyond what we could imagine. Even if there were such a thing as normal, Easter is the invitation to remember that what God has in store for us is far bigger than what we would imagine as normal. Resurrection is a reminder that even in the midst of death and darkness and despair, God is at work. The power of love continues to be at work in powerful ways in us and through us in our world. It's something only God can do. And our response is far less about believing this impossible, crazy news, and more about living this amazing news of resurrection. As we trust who we are, every detail of our lives, into the hand of the one who makes the impossible happen. For death could not hold him. Love is stronger than any power of the world. And Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Amen.